terms of, this is going to be a pair that, as you can see on the 5-minute chart, we're seeing a lot of strength in. 93.50 would be really what would be tantamount to either pressing validity or a fade on this pair. So let's talk about the ride that we've had on this loonie yen, depending upon where you got in on the ride. All right, so I know this is it's two groups of traders likely in this pair. A group of traders that got short back when I did in this area here. And then most recently, this might have been some traders that got short in this area here, or even right now. So you have to contrast all four of these. Now, are they all valid? Sure. Our initial setup was the larger circle. The three small ones are more near term. Now we can differentiate the three small ones with a slight, I mean there is a pretty big difference in terms of getting short here and here versus most recently. So these shorts are a little different because why? These shorts have had the opportunity to run through some support levels. These shorts have actually seen some weakness, right? Versus these two new ones, which have only seen heat, unrealized loss. So there's a big difference between the first two trades and the last two trades. Major difference. So for those of you that shorted with me back in here, this really shouldn't mean anything to you. Now, why do I say that? Because ultimately, if you think about the fact that we ran through 92.35, the optional 91.85, the 91.50 non-negotiable, the only thing that we did not get through is get to is 91.05, and therefore we did not get through the 91.00. After hitting 3 profit targets, 2 of which are non-negotiable, you have the luxury of doing what? Backing off by going to a safety net. But a safety net also presupposes that you have 0 of your capital at risk, which means at very worst, the furthest you should be away from current price action is at a break even. Okay? The furthest you should be away from price action at this point within the loonie yen on this entry back in here is a break even. Now on the more recent entry, if we wanted to consider that, and I know some of you took this on the bear flag breakdown and some of you took this on the bear flag retest. Now this was not a setup here, by the way. This right here was not a setup. But I did get a number of you that really liked that bear flag breakdown. And then when we retested that, I did mention that, yeah, you could go ahead and short there. So I know there's a small group of you that are short from this area. Again, if you got short from that trend line, you had maybe not 91.35 because it was so close, but definitely 91.85 and then 91.50. So again, 2 profit targets. No, you should not have your capital at risk any longer. I cannot, and I talked about ratcheting week before last, and I really went on a little bit of a ratcheting rampage because if you don't do this, and I'm going to say this, it's a generalized statement, but it's fact, you are never going to be a successful trader. Because what's happened consequently? We're right back up at levels that I got short at way back in here, but the market environment is different. The tone from the BOC is different. The angle of the wave is different. Now this is a distribution fade. I will say that if you want to fade this, you know, one of the things that we have talked a lot about is respect the trend that was. And before you start saying, well, I'm going to get long now, the fade I think is a valid opportunity. I'm not crazy about it. We're not getting any stochastics help here, but I think looking for exhaustion between 93.50 and between 93.70 is a valid way to look at the market. So if you get short on the loonie versus the yen between 93.50 and 93.70, okay, and your validity, I think easily could be 93.85. I'm not even going to give this thing to the 00. Either this thing just stays in check on these previous highs, which I call breadcrumbs, so 93.70, that high there is a breadcrumb. So either we find exhaustion in that area and sink right back down into the range, or I'm out. I'm not going to give this thing to 94. I have no desire to keep hanging on to 94. So we can go into like a fade type mentality. So this is a fade. It's a fade short sell on that daily loonie yen. But I need to mention this fade really is only applicable to those of you that are willing to take the potential heat. This fade only applies to those of you that are a little bit more aggressive, because fades are always aggro. But I think most of you should be in a point where, again, depending upon how long you've been with me, I realize there's a lot of new chatters here in the room. But ultimately, I want you to remember this short started from back in here, or worse, very worst, at the bear flag breakdown, retest, and that's given us all multiple opportunities to realize a profit, minimize our position size, and more importantly, ratchet. So what's happened here? If you're at a break even, what's happened here? Let's say at very worst, you're at a break even. You're just basically at zero again. You've given back unrealized profit on really what should be no more than half your position size. Because even if you did a minimal 1/4, you should be at half position size. And if you did 1/3, you should be at 1/3 position size. So there's no reason anybody should be in full position any longer. And here we are basically testing our break even. Now, if you got in below, if you got in at 92.95, 93.20, or 93.50, if you got in lower than that level, you're stopped out. You're stopped out not at a loss, but basically at a break even. You know, if you had a 93.95 entry, I can see where your stop loss would have been 93.05. So you took 10 pips per lot on your remaining entry. So whatever your entry was, chances are you're either testing the validity or you're just kind of waiting to see if this distribution fade works and whether or not you can hang on to this, maybe that initial entry. And I have no problem with that. For those of you that got in closer to 93.50, I think it merits being patient. We actually have a fade here. But anyone lower than that, you gave back a bunch of profit and then you're out. But you should have already taken out at least twice profits out of this market. So this is a zero loss scenario. It has been for some time. Okay? Absolutely has been for some time. So if you're not understanding the importance of the trade management side of things, the ratcheting, you are going to miss out on managing these trades properly and putting pips in your account. So when I talk about ratcheting, I'm talking about going from that point of validity stop loss to a break even to a trailing. There's two types of targets, finish line and safety net. We usually have two finish lines. You have two levels that are non-negotiable. You must take the profit as prices cross over there. Okay? So this is how you've got to think about not just always being in risk management mode, but being in trade management mode. And risk management falls under the larger umbrella of trade management. Okay? So yeah, for those of you that are in this still, up around 93.50, I still have a small position. I've basically given back some unrealized profit, and yeah, I'm willing to hang on to the prospect of a fade here, but I'm also in much smaller position size. Okay? So that's what's happening with the loonie yen. And this is what happens when a trade really moves strongly against our position, but not giving a, there's really nobody here. I can't stress this enough. There's nobody here that should be in a position of risking really much more than 5 to 10 pips per lot of their own capital. Is everyone clear about that? Really important point to make with this loonie versus the yen, because of the way in which we've moved. And yes, I do think there's a distribution fade opportunity here. Stochastics isn't helping, but that 93.50 to 93.70 does. So what we're talking about now is basically this. 93.70 aggro and 93.50 aggro. That's the scenario there now. Any questions on that? And I'll leave this. I'll actually keep this a short recording, and I'll actually put it in the members area because I think this is a quick 11-12 minute talk. Very, very important to understand this as we see it happening right now. Okay? All right, let's switch reels.